Hello, and welcome to Seattle Children's Hospital Anna Kleiss Boardroom. I'm Dr. Mike Astion, the Medical Director of the Laboratories at Seattle Children's Hospital, and today's webinar title is A Video Guide to Successful Laboratory Huddles by my colleague, Dr. Joe Rutledge. We'd like to acknowledge our partner Medical Training Solutions. The Seattle Children's Hospital Laboratory Webinar Series is available for free for all Medical Training Solutions subscribers until their renewal period. Upon renewal, this series will be available for purchase for a small additional fee. I'd like to remind everyone that today's program is accredited for PACE credit through MTS. You should have received the information that collect PACE credit for this webinar. If you haven't received these documents, please feel free to email Megan Hinch at MTS and she can forward them to you. Please note that today we will not be taking questions over the phone. If you'd like to ask a question, please submit it via the Q&A dialog box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can ask a question at any time during the event. However, questions will not be answered until the Q&A portion of our program after today's presentations. Okay, let's get started. Dr. Rutledge attended the Vanderbilt University School of Medicine in Tennessee and did his residency training in pathology and laboratory medicine at the University of Washington. Dr. Rutledge has completed a certificate program in medical management. He's currently a big shot, basically. He was the medical director of our whole department for many years, and now he's doing both regular bench-level pathology and laboratories medicine, as well as leading a very special group at Seattle Children's at a hospital-wide initiative related to auditing quality management systems. And without further delay, I would like to present my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe C. Rutledge. Joe?
Thanks, Mike. So this webinar is a collaboration between me and Rich Becker, who's a educator innovator with the College of American Pathologists. It was underwritten by grants from the College of American Pathologists as well. The handout that you have or will get is mainly the product of Rich, and particularly using some innovative ways to write procedures, and we hope you'll find it useful. So let's see really what it looks like as we get ready in our laboratory for the huddle. People assemble, I want you to start to look at how they're populating the visibility board at the front. Look at the side conversations that are happening, all of which are saving time for email. There's some informal interaction, but some of these conversations are actually formal. Everybody has a place to stand, and that makes the huddle actually go faster, and you know who's there and who's missing for the huddle. So we're almost ready to begin. We've got everybody in place. If we can just get Mike to stop talking there in the center, and there we go. So our objectives today are to provide you information to determine if a huddle is right for your laboratory. We're going to guide you through the steps, show you what a huddle really is, because once you've seen it, then it makes more sense. We're going to review the benefits, and then we're going to help you avoid some pitfalls. So what does a huddle look like? Well, there's a lot of different ways that you can visualize a huddle. None of these, of course, are from our laboratory, but they happen really all over the place. And in fact, the huddle is an integral part of a daily management system. Lean principles from the Toyota production system ask for more of a real-time management. And to be effective, the daily management system really needs to happen in the workplace. One way of doing that is to have brief, consistent, dynamic, and visual meetings. And that's what the huddle is about. We also link metrics that we gather in the huddle to overall improvements. So one way to begin, and really for us, the foundation of a daily management system is the huddle. If you want to look more deeply at the daily management system, I refer you to really a nice paper from the Henry Ford Hospital Group. So huddles are widely used. We didn't invent it here. We stole it. They're used in industry. They're used around event management. They've been used throughout the military. And in military health care, there's actually some data coming out showing that they can improve that healthcare outcomes in labor and delivery, for example. They've been promoted by the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and they're part of the team steps for patient safety. In fact, we address safety in our huddle every day. They're used throughout Seattle Children's Hospital, and in our laboratory, they've been used since 2011. There's a little bit of evidence published showing the benefits of the huddle. And from the Huddles at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, you can see that there's really some intangible benefits that derive from the huddle. And we've seen all of these in our own huddle. But there's also some tangible benefits, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. So the most important piece of the huddle is to really move into real-time management. So what we do is we look at the last 24 hours, we project what's going to impact us in the next 24 hours, and on Friday is really what's going to impact us over the weekend. We do a quick follow-up of prior issues, and we get a feel for the pulse of the laboratory. So all of that together, if you've done it right, translates into situational awareness. So instead of looking back at what's happened in the laboratory in the last 30 days, we really are looking only for 24 hours both ways. So we know what's going to happen, what has happened and what's going to happen, and it makes us prepared for things that could adversely impact the laboratory, as well as giving us the opportunity to institute countermeasures before those events happen. So why might you want to have a huddle? Well, you could ask yourself, do we have problems in our laboratory? Do new events suddenly catch us unaware? Do we ever get worried about not knowing what actually is happening in the laboratory? Is everyone doing their own thing, or are they all reading from the same page? Is most of my management occurring after the fact as opposed to before the fact? Do I ask that question when I hear about an event? If only I'd known that such and such was going to happen, I could have prevented it. And do problems take forever to resolve? Some of these happen in our laboratory. Of course, there are other reasons for a huddle, and I'll refer you to this paper to see why penguins huddle. So let's hear from some of my colleagues in the laboratory.
What is the huddle about? If you say, Mike, describe the huddle in 5 seconds, I'd say, well, a burden shared is divided and a joy shared is multiplied. And that's the huddle. So, you know, that's why people aren't coming to the huddle, is they can share their burdens and walk away a little lighter, or share their joys and have them multiplied. And so I think that's why they like to be there. And they like to see each other. Usually we say one or two funny things too, just to lighten the load. You know, people get the quip of the day, or they learn something just from the safety story. So it's good. People like helping each other out. Those are all reasons why it's magic. There's a tremendous positive feedback for giving honest information in terms of just running your operation better, which is really the thing that motivates lab professionals the most. Is just it. You know, you can have ice cream socials and tell people they're the greatest, get them Starbucks coffee cards, but lab people in general, this biggest single engager and motivator is when they know they're doing a good job and that quality's improving. That's what keeps them from leaving, basically. All the other stuff is great because I like ice cream, but I would throw all that stuff away in a second, you know, for knowing that we're doing a good job and getting better. And that's why the huddle works and being honest works, and why they like it, because they know we're getting better because of it. There's a lot of maneuvers in patient safety, you know, and management, and there's a lot of BS, but the huddle is like the real deal, and it's very human. Like, you're really touching base with people. It's good to see them. You can get a lot just through body language at how well people are doing, how much they're suffering. And it's really, I've been through everything: Lean, Six Sigma, patient safety training. I've interviewed people about patient safety because that's my area of expertise for, you know, the last 10 years, and it's really one of the best things. And I don't impress that easily, and I don't like a lot of the stuff that comes down the pike, but I just think it's one of the best interventions we've ever had. I would never get rid of it. Because everybody's there, there's the huddle itself and all the great sidebars to check in with people and affirm people and to make sure that things are sustaining. Then email, you know, you don't send email if you know you're going to see everybody at 9:45 every day and have a chance to, you know, talk with them. So it gets rid of a lot of email.
So the Huddle has benefits at multiple levels. Here you can see from Dr. Astion's expose that it has a lot of benefits at the top levels, and that's part of the buy-in. So it's going to be tough to have a functioning Huddle without the leadership in the laboratory being part of it. You also want to have a coach as part of the Huddle as well. So it's very different, though, than our usual monthly retrospective quality control work. It's really in the time, and you're participating in real time with your quality. To be successful, you've got to convince others it's going to help them, which in some respects means save time, but there's actually some other ways that people are helped in the Huddle, more than just the time savings and less email.
I think for me, the Huddle is very useful for me because it makes me form a habit of sweeping my area before I report out. I review what happens in the past, how to focus on today's event, and then prepare for tomorrow.
The Huddle gives us an opportunity for supervisors, managers, and directors to discuss any issues that have occurred the day before or anything coming up during the day. And it gives us an opportunity to resolve these issues in real time. A key piece to the Huddle is having pathologist support and leadership presence. It helps us evolve quickly and problem solve in the moment.
The advantages of the Huddle is giving me an instant snapshot of the status of all the sections of the laboratory. Huddle has been one of the most effective tools for management that I've used the entire time I've been the director of the lab.
So let's go through kind of some of the nuts and bolts of how to get a Huddle going. Of course, you can follow the procedure that you have. Let's just talk about where you're going to have it. We've had it in several different places, and what we've kind of decided is you need to have it close. You don't want people having to walk to another building. But at the same time, it needs to be free from interruptions. You want people standing because that forces the brevity of the Huddle, which means people are going to tolerate it better. You've got to start on time and you've got to end on time, and that's what the leader's role is to make sure you start and you get people back to their workplace as quickly as possible, and you want to keep it predictably short. Who comes to the Huddle? It's not just leadership, it's a person from each section. And that person can be the supervisor, but can also be a frontline technologist, as long as they've had a little bit of training to the Huddle, they've attended some, they've seen it, so that they don't get, let's say, too long-winded. You want to hardwire the Huddle in so that it's pretty much standard work, but realizing that you need to change it quickly if you need to. The organization for the Huddle should be whatever fits your laboratory, and you can change it as needed. It could be paper, and it could be whiteboards. The leader has to be someone who can listen and direct, but also has the ability to cut off speakers and say this needs to be handled outside the Huddle. And you've got to have backups, of course, if that person's not there. We integrated data into our Huddle, and you can decide if you want data there or not. In some respects, reporting firm data increases accountability for when a section has outliers around that data. It also is a good way of tangibly communicating what's happening in a section. While you want all the issues reported, you're unlikely to be able to solve those issues, but in fact, with everyone aware of other people's issues, it can stimulate them to solve their own problems. So clearly you'd like to do a PDCA cycle. Just start the Huddle. Just do it tomorrow. And then from that, come back and check and start making your adjustments. If you try to make it perfect to begin with, it's going to take you months to get started, and this is not rocket science. You can actually do it fairly quickly. The key thing is it needs to be engaging for everyone. Let's check and see how another one of my colleagues has been engaged by the Huddle.
I still find a lot of value in as far as getting FaceTime with my people. I sometimes get stuck in large projects, and so this kind of forces me out of my office to chat with folks, get FaceTime, and I think people really appreciate that. We've seen a big increase in our engagement scores. One other big advantage that I've seen that I appreciate is that it's a huge time saver, right? I think a lot of folks, when they think huddling, they think, boy, I don't have time to do an extra 10, 15 minutes. But in the long run, it saves you time, because by bringing folks all together at one point, they could share information, and then I could just move on with my day, and they could move on with their day. Whereas before, a lot of folks, they'd have something they want to tell me, and they'd have to stop me in the hall or come to my office. And those are interruptions that are necessary, but they're still interruptions. And so by consolidating it at the huddle period, it saves me a lot of time overall. One of the biggest advantages we've had implementing the huddle is that now there's a lot of visibility about how my group is doing. Other supervisors and managers could see on the board, and as I share each morning where we're at. So before, when we would struggle, nobody would really know. And it wasn't unless I finally got back to my desk or was able to chat with somebody, meet with somebody, get advanced requests for need or resources. But now it's clear every day how we're doing and whether they could give us help today or in the long term with more FTE or whatnot.
So we align our huddle categories for each day of the week along with the hospital's management system. So on Monday, we address quality with metric being corrected reports, skipping over typos. On Tuesday, we talk about overtime and savings, so it's kind of a monetary day. On Wednesdays, turnaround time is the measure for delivery. Thursday, safety issues, and Friday, employee engagement. We do talk about patient safety every day to elevate that as our major concern. So most sections have these metrics, and they've proved to be fairly informative over time. It doesn't mean they're, just by being at the huddle on a frequent basis, you get a feel for how these metrics run without actually having to plot them in a flow chart. Over time, we look at not so much as cost savings, but we look at it as a defect in the system that forces it. So if an area is having a lot of overtime, that there's a defect there. Maybe it's understaffing, maybe it's problems with instrumentation, maybe we don't have our testing schedule aligned with the clinical needs. Turnaround time, we really look at not an absolute number, but percent meeting a standard in that area. And our problems we used to restrict to those reaching the patient. Now we have very few of those, and we talk about near misses. And in engagement, we can talk about some of the recognition we want to give to employees, which then is turned into an email that goes out to the complete laboratory. So if you look, this is kind of a simplified version of our visibility board. But if you look at the measures we have each day of the week, and then the sections go down on the left side. And so each section will report on those measures just one day of the week, the data being for the entire week. We've divided our sections up pretty much like other laboratories, but we've added in some areas that maybe not every laboratory would have, like our research diagnostic testing services. We phone in for our off-site laboratories. One site we actually Skype in so they actually can hear and can report on a PC that everyone can see. And then we have our client services and LIS report as well. So that's the data piece, but every day the board is populated with colored dots, green being everything is good, yellow being something's not right, and they could be worse, but we're going to get through the day with no impact to the patient. And red is we have a big problem and we probably are going to need help, and that's usually reported with a countermeasure. And if there's no countermeasure in place, then we may spend an extra minute really trying to troubleshoot, decide how we're going to help that person turn from red to yellow. This is what our huddle board looks like. It's very busy, as you can see. We're getting ready to report on a Wednesday, so that's why Wednesday is blank. And it will be populated immediately before the huddle with the turnaround time data as well as the dots. And you can see there's some clusters of yellows there that are going on. Everybody's going to be watching how long an area stays yellow, it's consistently yellow or not. And then, of course, the reds we pay a lot of attention to. Sometimes the red goes for a long time because to fix a particular area may not be overnight, but it keeps it visible that that area or section is having struggles, and it means that we can not only start to address it in tangible ways, but we can also do visitations to that area as morale boosters so that the people working in that area know that we know they're struggling. So the visibility boards have been really useful to us. We started out with one that's movable, so that means that you can move your huddle around from place to place if you want to. You can also go a cheaper route, and depending on your hospital, you can just go down and buy the paint a wall, and all of a sudden you now have a whiteboard of your own. You might have to do that without telling anybody, though. Okay. So there's a lot of nuances in the green, yellow, red dots, and we kind of let that be a little fluid. So some people will report that they're yellow on a day because their staffing is down, and we've just decided that's okay. We can feel that they're stressed a little bit, even though it's not going to impact the patient. So we kind of still let that be reported that way. And it just, it's an evolution of how you want these to be defined. And in your handouts, you'll see some suggested ways of defining them. But in general, just let people report it the way it is. What do you really want to know about at the huddle? Besides, I'm green, I'm okay. And we do make everyone speak, green or not. They have to speak. And we found very early on, if everybody just nods their head, you have no problems in their laboratory. Once you make them say something, the problems start to come out of the woodwork. And in fact, that's what you want to hear about at the huddle. You want to know about your defects, and you want to know about more defects and more defects, and then you want to know what they're unhappy about. Because the defects is what you need to address. Then you also want to know who's done something really notable so you can congratulate them. And as I said, that's going to be as an email at the end of the week, but it also will be in the hallway. You walk past a person that's congratulating, say, hey, I heard about that great thing you did, great save. And that really boosts the morale. So dwelling on defects creates an atmosphere that fosters openness, and that openness will keep defects from being hidden, and if they're hidden, they're going to give you a false sense of security. So the huddle's not the place to determine why there's a defect, and certainly not the who, but revealing the defect or having those defects surfaced gives you an opportunity for improvement that you didn't have if you didn't have the huddle. The huddle has a lot of growth potential, and we found with experience and routine, the huddle runs faster and faster. So as it runs faster, you can start to add more items to the huddle. And then you can take them out if it starts to slow down. But you can collect information acutely if you need to. So if there's a big problem with, for example, in the wintertime with employee illness, you can collect those at the huddle and start to realize that you're short-staffed, that there's something going around the laboratory, and you can reinforce hand hygiene throughout the laboratory, not just when you go to patient care areas, but in the laboratory so that you don't spread disease. The huddle is standardized, but it's flexible. During the Ebola preparations, we flexed up and reported on our readiness every day for Ebola. That kept us on track, first of all, but more importantly, It allowed us to inform the staff of where we were heading, what our timelines were, so they didn't have to worry about being surprised by an Ebola patient. Sorry. Yeah, I got there. I got to find the arrow here, I'm sorry.
An example of when the Huddle was really effective in getting our communication out was a meningococcal meningitis case that we had on a patient. So we had a spinal fluid that had this highly contagious bug in it, and we needed to let other laboratory departments know that if they received samples on this patient, they needed to be really aware and cautious with it. So it was a good way for us to get that out. They took that information to the upstairs huddle and got that name on everybody's radar.
So that really helps us to keep the staff safe, and those things then get communicated very quickly from the huddle. So there's many variations on the huddle depending on your laboratory. You could be addressing staffing or equipment or volumes in the laboratory, or if production is very constant in your laboratory, you could be reporting only on client problems. So the idea is to customize what gets reported and what is useful for your laboratory. Now, our huddle is really part of a system. We have section huddles that report up to the lab huddle reports to a hospital huddle, and then the reports come back the other way as well. And each of those times, information is filtered. Not everything at all the section huddles need to be reported up at all to the lab huddle. And likewise, at the lab huddle as a group, we actually decide what's going to go to the hospital huddle. So it's really a cascading event. Section huddles are a little different than the lab huddle in that they are more granular. They're closer to the operations. All the attendees there need to know all the information that's going to be talked about, so you want all the staff there. You can discuss procedural changes, and sometimes when a procedure is changed, we talk about reinforce that every day for a week. It also, you're able to say, watch out for, that may be a particular patient that's coming through that requires special handling, and that there may be a change in X, so be observant, or handling a specimen in a non-routine fashion. So let's take a look at one of the...
It is Thursday the 24th. We have 268 folks in-house, 2 ECMO patients, and 36 heme visits today, so it shouldn't be too terribly bad with the workload this afternoon and this morning. Do we have patient safety stories to start?
I do. We had a specimen yesterday that came in, and we noticed that there were 2 patients that had the same last name and a very similar first name, 4 letters starting with M. And so when we noticed, I ran over here to make sure that we had matched up our paperwork with the slide, and we hadn't. It was the wrong patient name with the slide. And we should be able to catch those because when we scan the slide in, it would come up with the proper name, and we'd notice that, oh, that's already finalized and that's already good. But I switched them real quick.
And it got caught before it got reported?
Before it was even looked at.
Awesome. Those are the best kind of safety stories. Well, what kind of safety tools did she use in that catch this morning? And maybe some stop and resolve. All right, do we have more patient safety stories? Any other examples for us this morning? Okay, do we have any high-risk patients or procedures or non-routine procedures or tasks? Being Thursday, we may get apheresis patient today. Situations or conditions that distract. Could be traffic behind the vitroses. Chemistry's moving upstairs, so they're moving a lot of equipment out the door and up the elevator there. So you may see a lot of traffic behind there. Any safety issues that impact other departments, or do you have any deficiencies? Have everything you need to deliver safe care? Or are there any conditions outside our department that will impact our ability to deliver safe care? And the ongoing construction, I still hear drills now and again, so construction is ongoing and it's going to get worse before it gets better, but we will get through it, and keep your eye on the prize. It will be across the way in a better place when we're done with the construction. Okay, I believe that's it. Is there anything else? I think staffing is otherwise good. Okay, I believe that's it then. Thank you. Thanks, Jenna.
So you can see that in our core lab, the busiest part of the laboratory, it's all, rapid turnaround testing. That huddle is pretty quick, and it's not going to impact the turnaround time of anything. And everybody is there. If we got bombed with specimens during the time, somebody could break out of the huddle very quickly because they could see that was happening. And you can address all those things that John nicely asked people about. Is a hematology analyzer going to be down for PM? Do we have more ECMO patients than we should have? Is the president in town and couriers are going to be late because there's blockage on the interstate? All those things can get addressed, and we can develop the countermeasures for them. We have a lot of different visibility boards around the laboratory, and each section is different. We could have standardized. One thing we've learned in our laboratory is you can over-standardize, and so we've let each section develop the visibility board they want. So this one is in anatomic pathology, and in fact, visitors to the department can look very quickly and see which pathologist is on for what and go directly to their office without interrupting pathologists along the way looking to see who has their slides. Sometimes we just track the workload with a visibility board so everyone can see which cases are happening when and what their progress is. So section huddles are similar to a section meeting, but they're very fast. They happen in the workplace. Everyone's there. They're daily. And it's actually a very happy place. And we don't have those boring section meetings that used to happen once a month where nobody could attend because at the time of the meeting, it was way too busy for them to be there. So we're going to show you the huddle. You've already seen how we assemble and we focus on the readiness. As we show this video, I want you to look and see that the reporting is very concise. There's minimal interruptions. We use colors for the visibility board. Everyone's talking. Everyone is standing in order of the way they report. And there's some positive feedback that's happening. What you don't see very well is behind the cameras, there's a lot of other people attending the huddle that are not reporting at that time. And then we're projecting what could go.
Go ahead, Jean. Biochem is green. We did have an MSUD confirmation from newborn screen. The patient's coming in today, but we anticipate needing to do weekend runs, so we'll have the appropriate staff. Chemistry is also green. We're 100% for our turnaround times of immunosuppressants. We are still sending out estradiols due to a manufacturer issue.
Lab GC is green. We're 100% for our turnaround time metric of UM case review within 1 day.
Cell markers is green for workload and yellow for staffing. Our malignancy turnaround time is 93% with a goal of 70.
Core Lab is green for workload and staffing today. We recently completed a middleware project to reduce the number of manual disks by another 5%. I'll report on costs for that next Tuesday. All of our turnaround times are 95% with the exception of the HBTs, which are 80%.
Both the Bellevue Laboratory and the South Laboratory are green for their metrics at 100% with the goal of 95%.
The lab assistant team is yellow for staffing. We were 100% for our canvas goal last week.
Research lab services is green for staffing and workload. We are 100% on our turnaround times for batch shipment deliveries.
Green, although next week we will have one person on vacation, so we may be less than 100%.
And pathology is green.
Lab client services is green. It's been 31 days since our last duplicate medical record number was created.
Lab information system is green. A reminder that tomorrow morning our registration and billing system will be down between 2 and 4. It's expected to have very little impact to the night shift, but IS will be monitoring the point of care interface because it failed to come back up last time. Our turnaround time for new test bill is at 100%.
Microbiology is green. We're investigating an intra-lab possible contamination event that will affect turnaround time.
Send-outs is green today.
IDL is yellow due to turnaround time.
Blood bank is green today. We're going to be taking down the irradiator next week for periodic maintenance, but we're not expecting any delays.
Any other announcements? Today's census is 269 bone marrow transplant patients, 16, 2 ECMO patients, and 45 scheduled heme lab visits. So anything from daily safety brief?
There were no lab issues mentioned at daily safety brief. I did bring up our 2 abnormal conditions. One is the push and the knee, all the overtime, and the things related to just the Bellevue contamination event. And then the other was things related to the construction, and that I tried to explain very briefly that we're in a few month construction project, and we're hitting the part that is critical because it's in the core, and so it could affect emergency room, ICUs, etc.
So we'd like to think of ourselves as a learning organization, and actually the Huddle has been looked at in that regard. And there's a lot of aspects to the Huddle that enhance learning. And in fact, all of those things actually have been happening in our Huddle without us actually planning for them to happen. We use stories and metaphors. There are some reflexive questions. Occasionally, we can have very dramatic dialogue. We try not to do that every day. There's certainly been a lot of collegiality, and people attend the Huddle on a regular basis, and we do mix up the staff that attend. Nobody is excluded from the Huddle, certainly, and that helps to let frontline staff interact with the medical direction of the laboratory as well. And it's daily. Now, this is the West Coast. Daily means Monday through Friday. It does not mean Saturday and Sunday, and we have a different system in place to deal with Saturday and Sunday. Those of you on the East Coast, I'm sure, will probably want to do your huddles 7 days a week. There are some long-term cultural changes that we've seen. First of all, the Huddle is a shorter meeting, but we found that other meetings have become shorter and more frequent, and we have very few hour-long meetings now. There is a standardized reporting of issues and events using an SBAR motif. We actually have a global awareness of everybody's problem in the laboratory, and we can learn from those problems and look for where that situation could occur in our own sections. So there's an overall emphasis now on preventive action. What we explain to individuals looking at the Huddle is that some of this communication is actually telepathic because it happens on a daily basis. Sometimes what's not said is just as important as what is said. And so outsiders that look at the Huddle really can't figure it out on the first glance because of all this telepathy that's happening. And then most people on their calendars have reserved 5 minutes after the Huddle in case they need to have a quick post-Huddle meeting to work out a problem. And many problems can be handled in those couple of minutes by putting 3 or 4 heads together. Our Huddle ranges from about 7 minutes to 10 minutes. And it would be extraordinary to go over a 10-minute time limit. What one observation we've had is the quality cycle is much faster, so that while we've used to think about monthly review of qualities and problems for each section, what we found is that people had difficulty remembering the issues. We had trouble closing the loops, and now most of the loops get closed in 24 hours because everybody's heard about the problem and they're expecting a resolution report. Moreover, problems get reported on a daily basis, so you don't need to retrospectively look at them for every 30 days. So that's been really nice. It also, though, changes that quality cycle because individuals coming from outside the lab are looking for a 30-day review, and it's difficult to explain to them that we're reviewing in the moment rather than retrospectively. And that moment allows us to have a more memorable review. We can get the facts quicker, and we can get a resolution, more likely to get a resolution. So Wayne Chandler is a fairly new addition to our laboratory, and let's see what he has to say.
It's really been a refreshing new kind of process to be involved in. I think it's much more efficient than a lot of the things I've seen in other places, and I think it's something that once you get used to trying it, that most patients will wonder how they could do without it. But then another thing that I find that you might not be straightforward is that all of a sudden you've got all the leaders there, and if you need a 5-minute conference with somebody sidebar to get something going, it prevents like 3 other meetings you're going to have during the day, because you can see what's wrong and say, okay, I need to talk to you and you and you, and you talk for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden you've settled something that you would take secretaries and everybody else another 2 days to set up.
So we are still doing a PDCA. We are wondering whether all of our data is accurate. We have to figure out what response we're going to have when information that's important doesn't reach the huddle. That's infrequent, but it does occur. We reevaluate our metrics. Are these the most useful metrics to us, or would something else be more useful to us? Should we have a retreat, preferably somewhere where it doesn't rain, where we stand back and take a look at the huddle and see if it needs to be refreshed a little bit? And how do we get information out to the staff? Is it really word of mouth working for everybody? And what do we do when a reporter doesn't show? Right now, we send somebody to that section to make sure that the reason they didn't show is because there's not a catastrophe. So what do we need from you? On the back of your handout are some questions. We want to know, was this webinar useful to you or not? But more importantly, we'd like to find out about your experience going forward. Did you build a huddle, or did you already have a huddle? And did this help? Is your huddle better than our huddle, and what do we need to know from you? And if you tried to build a huddle, did it work? If it didn't work, why not? And how might you modify your huddle from this? So take a look at that last page of the handout, check it off, and let us know if we can follow up with you in a few months to see how it went with you and the huddle. And I'd just like to close with a couple more words from Dr. Astion.
It's a great way to just rapidly disseminate that information and get a rapid response. We had a really closed down, strongly reduced point of care analyzers because we had a recall. There was a manufacturer recall. And we were able to shut down point of care testing by 90% and put in a mitigation strategy within 24 hours. There's no chance without a huddling system we could have done that. We had to send 1,000 emails, figure out who's not on vacation, make a bunch of calls, page 1 million people. It never would have happened. And that, we were able to do it. There's other incidences of that as well, but you can really get stuff out because the president's at the huddle and the chief medical officer and the head of patient safety and all the heads of service, a lot of the heads of service. We keep the patients safer because of the huddle. There's no doubt about that. I can give you 100 examples of that. I could sit here all day and tell you examples why patients are safer because of the huddle.
So what questions do you have for us?
Joe, thanks so much. There's a lot of questions, so I'll just take them in random order. trying to create a theme. Natasha, how many did we have today visiting us from around the nation?
We had 128 labs.
128 labs, a new record, which shows in general that people are attracted to the huddling concept, or perhaps they thought we were going to do a video of the Super Bowl. But in any event, our first question is, what are some huddle no-nos? Like if this is a person writing in and they're just getting started and they're looking for behaviors to avoid.
Well, if you think about the meetings that you hate, it's a talking head up front. And so the last thing you want to do is have the leader, whether it's the leader of the huddle or the leader of the lab, keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. You want other people to talk. It doesn't do any good for the leader and the coach to talk. You really need to hear from people. So as my son always reminds me, it's why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, is the huddle is an opportunity to hear.
The next question is regarding the section huddles and the various huddle boards that were shown in your presentation. The question is, do all huddle boards have to be the same? And if they're not the same, do they have to have the same elements?
So the argument to have the sameness is it means that the leaders walking from section to section, or at the hospital level from department to department, are seeing data presented the same way. But you know what? The leaders don't need to necessarily present the data. If they have trouble understanding it, it gives them an opportunity to ask someone in the section to explain it to them. So we took the alternate view of let each section develop their visibility boards in a way that would be most meaningful to those people doing that work, and the leaders will just have to suck it up and have an interpretive guide if they really want to dig down into that visibility board.
Next question is, what is an example of a safety story, and does it have to be a story, or can it be like other things?
Well, we find that if you just say we had three technologists who broke test tubes and cut themselves yesterday, and then you move on, that's not very dramatic. And there's not as much learning as embellishing a little bit with, you know, Sally dropped a tube, stepped on it with her bare foot, cut an artery and lost a unit of blood, and we had to call a code. People tend to remember that a little bit more than just 3 instances of cutting something. So we use safety stories as a tool to help people remember, embed that, and to go back. And you can do that with a near miss as well. You can talk about, it's a great save because it didn't reach the patient. And then you can say, if it had reached the patient, these bad things would have happened. And that really cements it, and then people start to think a little bit more. They think about their own situation, and they can put in some preventive measures.
A related question is, do you encourage all the sections to eventually, over time, report safety stories?
We encourage it. And the fortunate piece of this is not everybody has a safety story every day. So sometimes they have to steal from others. Maybe they heard about a safety story at the lab huddle and they bring it back to their area because there wasn't a safety story. As I said, we've tried to push this down to near misses, but to be truthful, there's only so many near misses a day. So you kind of have to steal a little bit. And sometimes somebody will bring a safety story from home. And the principles are the same. So if you avoided a problem at home or you had a bad experience at home or driving to work, that can be a safety story for people, and we want to keep our employees safe to and from work and at home as well, because then they'll be there the next day.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to improvise a little bit.
We have. I just want to mention to Natasha and Surya that there's a couple of requests regarding will the slide presentations be available, and then we can make them available. Is that correct?
Yeah, if the users who are online now can send me your email address through the same chat function, I can send it to you right after the presentation.
That sounds good. The next question is related to can huddles be effective at replacing weekly or monthly? There's a couple questions related to this. Can they essentially replace some weekly or monthly meetings?
I think that's what we've observed, and others I've talked to that have seen our huddles and gone back and done it have also observed that having multiple short meetings really removes the necessity of that monthly meeting. Having said that, there's still reasons for monthly meetings. That may be planning, strategic planning. It may be really wrestling with some big issues around staffing, or around construction, or instrumentation purchases. You can't handle those in the huddle, so it doesn't replace all of them. But the section check-in meetings, I think it really replaces those.
Yeah. Next question is, this reminds me of the time we had the guy fall off the ladder almost while we were watching, during huddle out the window. We've had a couple things happen looking out the window. And they ask, how would you address an emergency or urgent issue that's brought up in the huddle or that you see from the huddle? That's happening during the huddle.
Yeah, so the best one was literally you saw the windows in the videos, and one day there was someone on a ladder. Now, this huddle was happening about 4 stories above ground level, and literally the guy was standing on the ladder, and it fell over in front of all of us watching. So we sent someone out to call, in this case, buildings and facility, to get them out there, security to come in and move people away or stop people from being able to walk underneath this construction site, which of course should have already happened, but it didn't.
So in general, Joe, you would say that if there's an urgent thing brought up at huddle or that occurs during huddle, we would peel someone off. We wouldn't make them wait to the end of the huddle to deal with it.
No, there's absolutely, in addition to the reporters, there's probably half that many people out in the wings that you didn't see. And all it takes is an eyebrow raised, and one of those people will go and attend to it. If it has to be a person that's reporting, somebody can step in for them as well.
Yeah. The next question is related to some specific things around the management huddle. Why do people have to stand on one spot? That seems very extreme.
It is. It's an example of extreme standardization, and I wish I could say it was my idea. It wasn't. It was a fantastic idea. People randomly stood, and then they had to look to see who the next person to report was going to be. Even though it's up on the board, they had to give that person a cue that they were up next. And the person that came up with that idea, and I don't know, I'm looking around the room to see if they're here, said, we could probably make things go a little faster. And lo and behold, it's about a 30-second savings.
Yeah.
Well, if you've got a 7-minute huddle, 30 seconds is a big waste. And if you take that out, you've saved yourself, everybody in that room, 30 seconds.
And our last question, for labs that are much larger than yours, like say a 800-bed hospital that has 3 large shifts a day, would you recommend that they huddle on all shifts?
Certainly, you're going to have to change if you're a reference lab, for example, that most of your work is at night. You're probably going to want to huddle right before that massive workload hits you. And you might want to huddle at the change of shift the next morning so you can pass that along.
Yeah, and I would note, I think our nurses huddle on all shifts. Is that correct?
Nurses huddle at all shifts, and phlebotomy and processing huddle on all shifts. It's difficult to get them together, and Jack's done a great job of having multiple smaller huddles just because it's hard to get people together.
That's all the time we have, and that was terrific. I want to thank everybody from, I think we had like the primaries, we covered all 50 states today, not just New Hampshire and Iowa, and which was nice. And I want to thank Dr. Rutledge for giving a great talk about huddles, and I think we made some requests of our crowd to send their handouts to us. They have an email address for that, Joe? Or?
They have it on that back page. They can fax it, they can email it, they can use regular mail. the key thing is we want to be able to get back to you, because we'd like, out of the 128, we'd like to see 125 of you do a huddle.
Yeah.
And we'd like to be able to come back and
do a lab talk about it.
Someday do a lab talk about how this has been beneficial. If nobody does a huddle, just don't tell me. Okay?
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. So I'd like to thank everybody from around the nation. I'd like to thank Joe, and remind everybody that our next presentation is entitled Healthy Economic Value of Calprotectin Testing, a Gastroenterologist Perspective. And the presenter will be Dr. K.T. Park, Co-Director of Stanford Children's Inflammatory Bowel Disease Center, and that'll be Tuesday, April 19th. At 11 a.m. Pacific, which is 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you and goodbye from the Antichrist Ballroom at Seattle Children's Hospital.